press the microphone, it does help significantly. A very good evening and welcome to this evening's Cabinet meeting on the 13th of February. So welcome to the new banking hall at Torbay Council. That's where we are this evening. So we are not expecting a fire alarm, and should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest fire exit and gather in the car park next to the library. If I could ask if you would ensure that all mobile phones and electronic devices are on silent. I'll now ask the clerk to let you know how this particular meeting will run.
Thank you, Chair. Please note we are operating hybrid meeting arrangements with officers and councillors who are not members of the Cabinet having the option to join the meeting via Zoom, and are also live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Members attending the meeting remotely must use their raise hand function when they wish to speak and to declare any interest at the appropriate time. If anyone attending the meeting remotely loses connection, the meeting will continue and they will have the option to follow the meeting via the YouTube live stream. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you indeed. Item 1, apologies. Do we have any apologies, please?
I have none, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, disclosure of interest. Does any member have a pecuniary or a non-pecuniary interest in any item on this evening's agenda? Thank you. None are indicated. I can confirm that I have no urgent items this evening, so we will move straight on with item 5, which is the redevelopment of St Kilda's in Brixham. Councillor Tyman, I understand that you're happy to propose.
Thank you. Yes, I'm delighted to propose this paper on St Kilda's. St Kilda's, a former care home, has been standing derelict in Brixham for pretty well as long as I can remember, pretty well as long as I've been a councillor, certainly for the last 8-10 years or so. And there's always been talk about how we could use that site usefully. I think there's always been a wish to do something like the proposal that's in front of you now, but it's been quite a struggle to get to this point. I think that reflects the difficult market that we have at the moment in terms of high construction costs, high-ish borrowing rates, and I think many councils in many projects are finding difficulty with viability. I think, therefore, the fact that we've eventually got a proposal that can be brought before us today is thanks to a lot of work by by colleagues who were working within the Tor Vista organisation, and much more recently to the efforts from Sam Irvin, our Head of Strategic Housing and Delivery. And we've eventually got to something that I think works well for us. The basic scheme, which you've all been able to read up about, is for the construction of 23 units of accommodation. I think, if I remember rightly, 13 one-bedroom, 9 two-bedroom. They will be for occupation, for people who need rental properties at social rent prices, and for people who are 55 years of age or older. As with anything in the Brixham, fitting the neighbourhood plan there, the priority will be given to Brixham residents to go there, and we believe, and this has been targeted to suit people who want to downsize in their more advanced years to a property that is well managed, modern, and which has got good links, good ability to communicate with their fellow residents, etc. I think it's a good scheme, and I am very pleased to bring this forward. The only word of caution is we have still yet to get approval or get a funding bid through to Homes England, and their contribution to this scheme is absolutely vital to allow us to go ahead. We've still got a few other bits and pieces to sort out, such as transferring back the land from Tor Vista to the council, and it's not anticipated that demolition will commence and building to follow immediately afterwards until about the middle of this year. Probably July, August time is most likely, and it will be, we believe, round about an 18-month period for demolition and then construction. So we'll be hoping to have this finished and ready for residents in early 2026. So what we have to recommend, or what we have to agree today, is to recommend to council a package here that involves prudential borrowing, and I'm afraid I've lost the moment the precise the figures. Can someone help me with that?
Page 5.
Page 5. Right, thank you. So the detailed, I'm looking at the wrong thing somehow. Oh, page 5. I'm looking at the original.
Okay, let me help you if I may.
If you could read out for me, please.
Of course.
That would be. I'm looking at the original proposition here.
Okay, so the revised recommendation came out on a separate report, and is as follows: that council be recommended to 1. Approve the inclusion of the full St Kilda scheme, including the addition of demolition of the former care home and the construction of 23 new age-restricted flats for social housing in Torbay Council's capital programme. And 2, increase the capital programme for the St Kilda scheme to a total sum of 53683,164, which is just over 5.5 million, to include costs already incurred and the costs of demolition and construction as set out in the exempt Appendix 1, and 3, to approve up to 2.667058 million of prudential borrowing funded from rent receipts net of the costs of maintenance and management of the completed scheme. Do you have anything further to add, Councillor Simon?
Yes, very briefly. I believe the figure you read out wasn't quite the figure that's on the report. It's 5,683,164.
Sorry, that's what I have in front of me. My apologies if I read something different out. Sorry.
Okay.
A bit of dyslexia, I feel.
Yeah. So that's the total build cost. And just to say, it is a fixed. We have a fixed price contract, ready to go, all approved. Details are in that exempt appendix. So I think everybody is reasonably comfortable that in this instance there should not be any significant deviation from that proposed figure.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Simon. Councillor Lewis is going to second this proposal.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Chairman, and I'd like to congratulate Councillor Alan Timon for all the hard work he's put in, because I know he spent a lot of time on this project, and to his team for getting it across the line. When we, following May, we said that we would deliver, and this is one of the projects that we will deliver sooner rather than later. So I'm delighted to second it, and I hope that my Cabinet colleagues will do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'll open up for debate from Cabinet members. Any questions or any comments? Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm particularly pleased to support this. My late mother was one of the very last residents in St Kilda's. I think she was there in 2015, possibly 2016. I was certainly a councillor again when it closed, and because my mother was a resident there was very little I could say, other than privately, to express my disappointment at the closure, because it was, I thought, a much appreciated facility. So it's been incredibly sad for me personally, when I spent a lot of time in Brixham, to see it empty. And it's the demographic challenge of that far side of the bay. So Brixham, along with Cherson and Gampton, has an older population generally than Torquay and Paignton, but most of the accommodation that we have for older people is in Torquay and Paignton. So there's absolutely a great demand for accommodation for older people to meet their needs, their special needs, over on the Brixham side. So I very much hope that this project will go forward and should then free up, as people move in from larger family houses perhaps, it should free up accommodation that then can be available for others, and all round to be a good thing. So hoping that Homes England and the source of finance will come good, and we can have a new St Kilda's. And I think the people of Brixham will be very pleased indeed to see that take shape. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Billings.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I thought the meeting might be might appreciate being informed that this decision will see the delivery of the St Kilda's site for 23 units, which is a great result when we compare it to the original allocation of the site within the Brixham Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan for 12 units. So what we've got here is we've got a brownfield urban site that's not only delivering much needed accommodation for the people who it will be used for, but also a very appropriate use of land to deliver housing. So this is a brownfield site being intensively used to develop the needed housing within a disused town centre site, so that we don't have to build on sprawling into the open countryside. So I think that not only a great result for the people of Brixham, but also a great result from a town and country planning perspective. So delighted to support this as well when it comes up to the vote, Chair.
Thank you very much. At this point, I'll move out into the wider room and also give an opportunity for anybody who's joined us on the Teams meeting, if you wish to be involved or ask a question or have a comment. If you'd like to raise your virtual hand, that'll be fantastic. But going into the physical room, Councillor Long, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. And I'm pleased that this project, which started under the last administration, has continued under this one. Although I do fear, as I'll explain later on, that it's being delivered later rather than sooner, rather than later, as has been stated by Councillor Lewis. The first thing I wanted to say is that the report did hint that it was for Brixham residents first, and I'm glad that Councillor Timon confirmed that. I just wanted to check what the timescales were for people who in Brixham who wanted to bid on that, on properties at St Kilda's, and whether the same applies to any properties that they're downsizing from into St Kilda's, whether that rule also applies to them, and any timescales for that. I understand from the report, and happy to be corrected if I'm wrong, that any grant from Homes England is dependent on the council getting investor partner status. I think that's right. And of course, we had that before through Torvista. We're having to apply for it again because we've dissolved it. So that's why it's later rather than sooner. And that's just my frustration that along with having all the governance things that we're having to do as a result of the closing of Torvista and the closing down the TDAs, so the council is having to go through a whole lot of processy things and spending time on that rather than actually delivering. And so that's where the frustration lies. Other councils, I understand, are keeping their housing companies, and whilst they recognise that there is a short-term cost, it might deliver in the future. So unfortunately, the council appears to be spending a lot of time doing processy things rather than actually delivering. Thank you.
Any further comments or debate from the room or the virtual room before I bring back to answer those particular points? Okay. No, I don't think that's a hand. No, that's just it looks like a hand, Councillor Bye, but there's a hand that's not a hand on the screen. It's not a virtual hand on this occasion. So I'll move back to... Oh, have we just got a hand there? Yeah, we have now got a physical hand. Sorry, a virtual hand. Thank you. Councillor Anna Tolchard.
Just to say that it's obviously great news for Brixham. It's been a long time coming, and we look forward to it being delivered, particularly for primarily the residents of Brixham. I should be tempted to bid for accommodation there myself, I think. Great news, and I hope it's supported tonight and goes through to council and is supported there. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to the Cabinet now, and particularly Councillor Tyerman, to have opportunity to answer the 2 points that were raised.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Long. I think it's debatable what has taken this long. I think, as I see it, when I first looked at the proposals being brought forward, we still had a significant viability gap. And whatever else was going on in terms of bringing it forward, we clearly, when we looked at that, were seeing that it needed a very substantial amount of one-off funding from the council, in fact more funding from the council than we would have had available. The issue has been far more closing that gap and finding a way of making it financially viable. And I have to say, I think if we hadn't had Sam Irvin's input, we wouldn't be where we are even today. It was looking that difficult to make it viable. But we're there, and I'm just pleased we got there. In terms of progressing now, we actually have got a slight problem. We can't proceed with demolition quite as quickly as we'd like. We haven't got the licenses in place to do that, and we're having to get that sorted out at the moment. In practice, although we could get on with without that got on with demolition earlier, we still have got to wait for Homes England to come back and okay it, so we're probably not losing a lot by that particular aspect. But it has been a complex web of bringing all the different elements together, but the funding was actually the crucial element. The other point you raised about the occupation, I haven't got the detail of that in front of us. I have had a conversation with officers. We believe from the survey research that was done there will be significant demand for these units. I think we have absolutely no difficulty filling them. I'm sure we could fill them more than 2 or 3 times over by what I'm being told. And we certainly want to give people a reasonable lead in time to explore and to look at them and to make their decision about whether they are suitable for them. I think it is important that we get the right people that actually feel it's the right move for them into here. People don't feel pressured, and we will give them plenty of time to make that decision. In terms of where we are now, I said it's about an 18-month build. We've got plenty of time to talk to people, to find the right people for that to happen, and we'll give that a lot of attention.
Thank you very much. For clarity and confirmation, I went through the first 3 points that Council recommended. Of course, there are items 4, 5, 6 and 7, which is for Cabinet to actually agree this evening. This is in the revised paper that agenda item 5 was printed and is available online 13th of February. And those decisions from Cabinet basically delegate officer for the Director of Pride of Place to a number of items which are in the report. But I just thought it would be worth clarifying just before I move to the vote. So all those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Move on to item 6, which is the award of contract for subsidised bus services. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to present the paper that we have before us on pages 33 onwards of our agenda pack. It's something that shows very clearly to the cabinet meeting, to members looking on, and also to the wider community, how this administration places an importance on people being able to access our bay in an accessible way, and in a way that is enabling use of sustainable transport mediums rather than reliance on the private car. I'm sure everyone that's used our local transport network will have at times realised that our buses, just the same as public transport infrastructure in lots of places in the country, at times looks a little bit tired. And as much as the operators can do to keep things clean, ultimately the tired nature of some of the stock provides a limiting on that. And what we have before us is an 8-year renegotiation of the contract, where the council is contributing £70,000 more per year. It will mean that over the next 18 months, all vehicles become fully accessible. It will mean that there's a whole new set of buses that will provide extra weekend services. And if we look at some of the extra weekday services, and if we look at the way that this money has flowed through, this is on page 41 and 42 of the pack, you'll see that there have been a series of contract negotiations with individual operators, and the routes are described in a series of lots, going through lots 1 to 9. And if I talk through some of those just briefly, we can see in relation to individual services what this means for people. So if I take, for example, around the for example, lot 6, and this is a route that will link the Torquay Harbour with the Strand, with Cockington, with Chelston, and with Park Hill Road. And we can see that we've got both earlier and later journeys which operate on both Saturdays and Sundays, with a route extension to serve Drake Avenue, Sherwell Valley Road, Sherwell Valley South, providing links that at the moment simply don't exist. And this is reflective of the other contracts that are shown in the nice different lots. So this is a really good outcome for our local community. Yes, it means the council's contributing £70,000 more on an ongoing basis. But if we didn't do that, we wouldn't have these additional routes, we wouldn't have the new fleet of buses, and we wouldn't have the extra services for our residents. And when weighed against that, I would put forward this proposal in relation to the contracts award that you've got described for us as a very good deal. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Jackie Thomas to second.
Thank you, Chair. I am happy to second this motion. Our bus services in Torbay play a massive part in our residents' lives. The new proposals will assist our communities getting to and from work, and our young people travelling to their places of education, especially with the extension of the services to include earlier and late timetables. It is important to recognise that 23% of our households in Torbay do not have access to a private vehicle, and that 24% of our residents have a disability affecting their ability to travel. Also, our population consists of residents who are 65 years and above, which is well above the national average. So this mode of transport is vital in enhancing and assisting with their day-to-day travel needs. I am also particularly pleased to see that the services 108 and 109 are mentioned, which will be very welcome and help the residents in my ward, particularly of King's Ash. Just the last thing I'd like to mention is the fact that the services listed in the report include low emissions on their vehicles, which will assist in the commitment in tackling climate change across the Bay. This is a good news story, and I'm very happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before I open this up for completion, our recommendation is three numbered. One, that Cabinet include in the final budget proposals to Council an increase in the budget available by £70,000 per annum. Two, that on the basis that one above is approved by full Council, that the preferred supplier for each lot 1 to 9 be awarded a contract for the provision of bus services covered by those lots for a fixed term of 8 years, beginning April 2024. And 3, that the grant funding awarded to the Council for the bus service improvement plan is allocated to these contracts. Thank you very much indeed. Let's open up to outside of the Cabinet at this point. Thank you. Councillor Long.
Just to say, I was pleased that the option to not include the 65 bus was not taken up by the under these proposals, because it does connect to a very deprived part of Heel, which involves a large hill. So I'm sure the residents there will be very grateful. Just one quick question, and I think I know the answer, but the 65 bus was until relatively recently 3 days a week, but it's now operating 2 days a week because of problems finding volunteer drivers. I'm assuming that should they ever find extra volunteer drivers to do a third day, that won't be possible because of the funding envelope.
We'll get the question answered in just a moment. Any other questions or any other comments from out? Thank you. Councillor Darling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it would be churlish not to welcome the step that this is building on. Approximately 4 years ago, we had just a handful of £1,000, probably £2,000 or £3,000 going towards bus subsidies in Torbay. Under the previous administration, this was significantly increased to 150,000, and now this is being built upon further. So it would be churlish not to welcome this step in the right direction. The government did bring in a bus back better approach. The Cornish hit the jackpot, as they often do for some reason, and drew in an awful lot of money to be able to enhance public transport across Cornwall. How are we lobbying government to make sure that we get the balance right, that we keep up with the Cornish, because it does seem that we often do end up drawing the short straw of level of funding, whether it's busing back better or other government pots. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any further hands around the room. My apologies. Hiding behind the pillar, sir. Councillor Cowell.
Thank you, Chair. And like Councillor Darling, I absolutely recognise this increased investment and the opportunity to improve bus services for our residents in some of the more hard-to-reach parts of our communities, and the ones that Stagecoach choose to ignore because there's no profit in it for them. And there lies much of the problem. But I would also like to seek assurances that whilst we welcome the extension of routes around parts of the Shippey Ward, that at the earliest opportunity, the Fowey Loop is reinstated to serve the several hundred residents who have been cut off ever since Stagecoach withdrew that part of the 35A, 35C service. It's disappointing that the opportunity wasn't taken as part of this process, and I would just seek reassurances that this would be addressed as a matter of urgency. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else before I bring that back? Okay, just finally before I move to Councillor Billings, my apologies, Councillor Bye. I missed your indication earlier before going outside of the room.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's absolutely no need to apologise. I just thought you were doing things a little differently. I think this is the best news this year. And when I announced the improvement to the 64 bus service, hopefully, if it gets support tonight, and hopefully if it gets support for the whole package through the budget process, you know, the members of the Wellswood Community Partnership who were present last week, who, dare I say, sometimes are a hard-to-please group of people, they were nonetheless absolutely delighted to hear that there is investment in the 64, and I shall read this out. The service provision includes earlier and later journeys and removing a midday break. The service will also operate both Saturdays and Sundays. A low-floor, low-emission vehicle will be used on this service. So the 64 absolutely is a lifeline for the people who live in the Wellswood ward. So very, very much appreciate the work that's been done to bring this project to fruition. Absolutely a lifeline. It is not, with respect to my colleague Adam Billings, Councillor Billings, a question of tired old buses. It's tired old legs and steep hills, and the topography of the bay, particularly some parts of Torquay, are a challenge. I'm absolutely thrilled to see the number 62 is going to serve Sherwell Rise South. My great aunt Pat lived pretty much all her life at the top of Sherwell Rise South, and for many, many years, towards the end of her life, completely isolated in her house there. Couldn't get to church, couldn't get out and about. So she will be looking down on us and thrilled to see that there will be a bus on Sherwell Rise South. It's all to do with I think the mental and physical well-being of people to get out and about, to mix with other people, particularly as we all get older. And so this is really, really good news. It would be churlish not to support this, or not to say well done to all those involved. So thank you.
Thank you. We come back to Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members for those questions, which I'll try and deal with in turn. Firstly, Councillor Long, thank you for drawing attention to the improvements that we've been able to achieve in Lot 8 of the contract award, which is on page 42 of the pack. With the 65 service, as my colleague Councillor By identified in relation to one of the other routes. This also will be a low-floor, low-emission vehicle that will be used on the service. And I'm sure that if there was the demand, that at a later date we could review whether the service could be provided with extra funding. At the moment it's being provided with a funding on the basis of it's operating 2 days a week, and it's that's fed through to the recommendation on page 35 of the pack, paragraphs 3.1 to 3.3. Clearly provision of more days a week. If there was a financial request, that would be a renegotiation of that. If that's what was coming for, that would be a review at a later stage. If you're saying that's on a zero cost basis, then why wouldn't we want to do that? I think that's something that if that hasn't addressed your point, we can pick up later. In relation to Councillor Darling, there's two things. Your question broadly summarised in relation to what more can we do to seek improvements. Well, there's on Friday, I was in my cabinet capacity meeting with the regular meetings of the Torbay Bus Enhanced Partnership Board, where we have the bus service improvement plan, which is clearly focused on seeking to ensure we develop the best bus service that we can. And in that capacity, I'm aware that the team are working on some further funding bids, which may or may not result in a windfall for Torbay, but the team continues to work hard to draw in the maximum amount of funding that we can for the service, to make sure that our area gets as much of the share of government funding that it can, and hopefully we may well have some good news on that in due course, but now at this current point in time it's too early to say. Councillor Cowell, you identified, as you have for a number of times, and drawn my attention to the importance of the Fowey Loop. That is clearly recognised. It's something that often comes up in topics of discussions of the Torbay Bus Enhanced Partnership Board. It's very clearly recognised by all members of that this is one of the important items that we'd have on the we'd like to do list. At the moment, we've not been able to do it. It's very recognised that as more funding becomes available, that this is an important area where funding would be directed towards as soon as it's available. At this stage, I'm not able to give a further advanced answer than that, but you make the point, as you've done previously, that that's an important area. But let's not take away recognising there's always more that we can do about the very significant work that's been put in so far to get these contract awards in terms of the improvements across the bay as a whole. And whilst in some areas, yes, we clearly would like to do more, from the purpose of the bay as a whole, I think the contracts awards are a very good result, and I would highly recommend, Chair, that our Cabinet colleagues endorse the recommendation, paragraphs 3.1 through to 3.3 on page 35 of our pack. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Billings. So we'll move to the vote then. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you indeed. We move now on to item 7, which is the Revenue and Capital Budget 24-25. And at this point, we do have a notice of motion for 20-mile-an-hour neighbourhoods that we need to hear before we discuss the budget. And at this point, I bring in the promoter, Councillor Fox, to address the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to note that an additional £25,000 has been provisionally allocated to the implementation of the 20-mile-an-hour zones within Torbay. Disappointed, however, there's been relatively slow progress during this last 12 months, but I'm confident that Councillor Billings will use his good influence to ensure progress will be maintained over the next 12 months. I'm hoping this will be enough to secure satisfactory progress that's needed to bring about a safe pedestrian environment for our schools and our communities in Torbay. And basically, I consider this to be a step in the right direction, and on that basis, I will withdraw my notice of motion. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you indeed, Councillor Fox. Can I please confirm that the supporter, Councillor Verdi, is of a similar mind, please?
I'm certainly of a similar mind, yes, and I'm happy to go with Mike Fox on this one and also withdraw the motion. But I'd just like to add that more area could be included within those 20-mile-per-hour zones. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In which case, we note that the motion has been formally withdrawn, and we will move directly on to the revenue budget, and Councillor Tyman will be proposing the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Each year the budget goes through a number of stages, leading to a debate and acceptance in Council late February or early March. We're approaching that time, and the Cabinet now is happy to discuss today and present to Council next week its final proposals for the budget. To get this point has meant a lot of work for officers throughout the Council, in particular our Finance Director and his Deputy, Ian, who's here tonight. Our Finance Director, I think, is taking a well-earned break, so we'll be back to answer questions and help with the proposals to Council next week. we've been, I think, perhaps fortunate's the wrong word, but we have been very pleased that the government has turned round at the last moment and increased the settlement to us. It has meant that in these final budget proposals, we're able to introduce a number of items that had come to our attention in recent weeks, or indeed we just felt it was right to include to further enhance what we're able to provide for our residents in the coming year. We are going to be discussing this at Council next week. I don't think there's any need to go to great lengths at the moment to look at a lot of the detail, but I think we just need to set a little bit what the purpose is here, what we're doing at this stage, and the main aspects where this budget proposal has changed from those that was given out when it would have been about a month ago, before it went out to consultation and before it was scrutinised by the Priority and Resources panel. The Council has a statutory responsibility to set a budget each year, and by setting and approving this budget, with the allocations proposed, the budget will be used to achieve a range of objectives across the Council. In accordance with the Constitution, members will consider this on February the 22nd and will be asked to either adopt the Council's proposals or put forward notices of motion to amend the budget in accordance with Standing Order A 13.4. Within that budget setting process, the Chief Finance Officer must provide advice, and this report is included in the papers setting out his opinion. I mentioned that there were additional funds made available in this budget proposal, and I think it's just worth quickly summarising those. If I could just scroll down. Excuse me a moment. This just scrolls down. I can't get it to do the right thing. Thank you, Ian. The main changes that came through the budget proposal were an increase in social care grant of 1.727 million. Under arrangements that we have with the integrated for integrated care, that is split equally between adults and children's, and we are maintaining that split of that money. A small increase in the services grant, of £20,000. Public health grants have been confirmed, and allocations for Torbay was £146,000 higher than expected. We also, through calculations and on the basis of information submitted to us, are willing to provide or willing to accept an additional £470,000 of funding, which has been made available through the non-domestic rates. There is also a little bit of one-off funding that's been provided, a local business rate exemption for green plant and machinery, or our compensation for the fact that that is given, has added 51,000, and the government has also confirmed, and we are estimating that we will receive 225,000 with money that is released from the safety net and levy account in 2023-24. What is perhaps more important from the point of view of our budget going forward is what we are using these additional funds for. I've lost this again. There we go. Members may remember that we had a £300,000 budget gap at the time we put out our provisional budget. That has been closed through this funding. We also have discovered over the last few weeks that we need to find additional funds to cover payments made for fostering. Government has laid down a national fee increase of 7% in this area, and our provisional budget had only allowed, as it has across all areas of our budget, for a 4% increase. The additional cost of that is £300,000 to our children's services budget. Also in children's services, we are seeing the need to increase our youth justice budget. It is estimated that our additional requirement for that in the coming year will be £100,000. Traditionally, we have funded that to about half of that level, with partners providing the balance of the funding. We are therefore increasing our funding of £50,000, and we will be seeking appropriate contributions from our partners. Another item that we've had to increase, or we felt it right to increase, is that of concessionary fares. We've increased by £200,000 the amount that is being put aside or being paid over to our bus companies to provide this service. We are seeing increasing numbers using buses as it's recovering from the pandemic, and it is understandable that our bus companies are seeking a greater contribution for ourselves. That 200,000 at the moment is our estimate of what it's going to cost us. Negotiations are still continuing. We also have seen it in that Torbay has had a shortfall over a number of years in the income it receives compared with the budget levels set. We felt it right to partly close that gap by reducing those income targets by 50,000. That will not fully address the shortage that has been seen, and we are still asking the Torbay team to work up ways in which they can increase their income to close the rest of the gap. We've just heard from my colleague from Councillor Billings about, and we've all just agreed, the subsidised bus contracts costing 70,000. Then we come, I think, to a couple of items that were pointed out by the overview and scrutiny. We have put in 100,000 into this budget to provide capacity to accelerate the development and provision of affordable housing. In doing that, I think we are recognising that that may not turn out to be all that's needed. Plans are currently being worked up, and we will review that in conjunction with delivery plans to see whether that is sufficient to provide the extra capacity or whether it will need review and increasing further. But £100,000 we felt was the minimum that is going to be required. We have allowed for that and included that in our final proposals. We've also put in £100,000, which was suggested by overview and scrutiny, to provide extra capacity within our events team. It has been clear that the team has been struggling to cope with providing the events they have been providing in the manner in which we'd all like to see them delivered. I think that's been particularly evident in the planning and work going on to produce the air show, but I think it applies generally across all events. And finally, I think in this category, we are delighted to have been able to find £180,000 to provide the initial capacity to provide what is needed to meet requirements within children's services. I think we talked about that, and we'll talk about that, I think, at length on Thursday next week. But we've made that a start to providing the requirements in that area. I think finally, one-off funding that's gone in there, we've put £200,000 for cost of living, which will be split between supporting food banks, social supermarkets and debt advice. These areas we are hoping will receive more funding through government, but at the moment I think we have to accept that that is a hope rather than an expectation. And by putting £200,000 of ourselves, putting £200,000 into this budget, we allow planning to go ahead to make sure those vital services continue and are available from April onwards. We've also put £75,000 in to support sports, £50,000 to provide extra transitional funding for Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust, and as has been mentioned prior to me starting on this, £25,000 is there as a backup to providing the 20-mile-an-hour speed zones that are so needed outside our schools. I think that is a quick summary through what is a very long, lengthy document, and we are happy to propose that this goes forward.
Thank you, Councillor.
Do you want to read out the actual recommendation, or do you want me to find that?
I can read that.
I'll let you read that out.
No problem.
That's my proposal.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll include it in my seconding. So more than happy to second this proposal. I mean, Torbay Council were in a very, very different situation to the rest of many local authorities who are talking about Section 114s. Now, if you don't come from the local government family, that is local government code for bankruptcy. And we are nowhere near in that particular territory. You don't need to go too far outside of Torbay to see local authorities who are struggling with that great difficulty. We had our difficulties in Torbay some 10, 12 years ago, so we know exactly how that feels. Some of the detail that Councillor Tyerman went through is particularly associated with that new set of money that came from government's announcement on the 5th of February, that additional social care grant of 1.72 million. But don't forget, we did go out with our provisional budget. We've got the results back from the consultation of that provisional budget. We had a great response, and majority of people are in favour of those proposals. Those proposals, don't forget, include an additional £1.9 million of money being put into children's services, an additional £900,000 being put into adults. That was the baseline. All of the extra stuff that Councillor Tyerman spoke about is actually on top. Our base budget also includes Operation Brighter Bay, Operation Town Centre, £300,000 into both of those projects. It also includes setting up an events reserve of £1 million for the next 4 years. The £100,000 that Councillor Tyerman spoke about is in addition to the £1 million. So I would thank everybody who was involved in the consultation. I think it's also important to note that the council tax increase is actually proposed at 4.75% and not the legal maximum of 4.99%. We started this budget process starting at the bottom of the pile and working our way up to see what we could get to see what the lowest price we could actually get that increase to be. Lots of authorities I know start at the top with a 4.99, plug it in, and go from there. We did that a little bit differently. So we are working to ensure that we keep residents at the heart of everything we do. I would also like to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Did a great piece of work, and their recommendations that they put forward, were made a whole lot easier by that announcement that came forward from government, which meant we were able to include them within the final budget proposals. It would have been a lot harder if we hadn't have had that increased monies. So I think it is a great budget for Torbay. I think it is the stepping stones, something to build on, the foundations. We know that we've got some bumps in the road coming forward in the next 3 years, and there are bound to be things come forward that at the moment we have no idea about. However, I believe that we've got strong, stable foundations that we are putting in place, and I really am delighted to second this budget. I'm going to open it up for Cabinet members in just a moment, but before I do that, I'm going to invite Councillor Darling as the Overview and Scrutiny Coordinator if he has any comments. Thank you.
Thank you, and it's always nice to be made aware in advance, Mr. Chair, that you're planning to do such things. So, do warn me next time. As far as the overview and scrutiny work, I'd like to thank Cabinet members for giving freely of their time. I'd like to thank officers for their time as well, and also Priority and Resources members who assisted in reviewing and identifying certain pinch points of pressure on the budget. Clearly, the final proposals were only shared with members yesterday, and I would say that there's still time that we need to go through and work that through as an opposition and understand where there may be any hidden pinch points that we're not alive to. But it'd be churlish not to identify that clearly, money has been pushed towards the areas that we identified through that process, and one can only welcome that. And it's really important, Councillor Thomas alluded to the stronger financial position that we're in, and it's really pleasing that we as a local authority was identified as most improved local authority last April. And I would suggest it was only 6 years ago that we used to be on a watch list of councils that could go the wrong way and were at risk of financial challenge. So it is pleasing that that the latest administration, the council, are able to build on the firm foundations that we laid for you, rather than the wreckage and catastrophe that we took over a little over 4 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you indeed, Councillor Darling. So we'll come back to Cabinet members. Any Cabinet members have any comments or views that they'd like to share at this particular juncture? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move outside. Any councillors in the room or actually online wish to have a comment? Councillor Brooke, if you'd like to join us at the table, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to say a thank you as well. Having been on the review of the events and culture plan that Torbay Council introduced three and a half years ago, a huge amount of time was spent in looking how we prime events, how we look after culture, and the recommendations. I'm really pleased to see that there's been a bit of extra money going in to support the staffing levels, which is clearly weak. So thank you for that. Also, the money going to the Torbay Coast and Countryside Trust, I noted. I mean, they're such an integral part in looking after our beautiful area. So that money's very welcome. And a little bit extra to Tor Abbey, which is one of our gems in the bay, and without our support as a council, would fold. So that support's been going on for a number of years. We're increasing it now. But I do hope, and I wanted to note this, that they still do manage to increase their revenue so we can reduce the amount in the long run of supporting them. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brooke. Anybody else outside of the Cabinet? Okay, in which case I'll come back now to Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to it really endorse this budget that we have before us. We promised in our manifesto commitments that we would keep council tax down, and we would spend money wisely, and we would run the council efficiently. I think those are the first three of the listings under the heading of a strong grip of finance. And I really would say that that's what we've got here. If we think in terms of areas that are within my area of cabinet responsibility, and take, for example, the important 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I'm just using these as an example. This I could have touched on other areas, but these are the ones I know most. We've worked really, really hard to ensure, for example, that those 20-mile-an-hour zones are delivered, but we've recognised that the constraints of the council, that this is our taxpayers' money. So a lot of work's been put in by the officer team to work out how that work can be planned, and that's why the request in this budget that's being fulfilled was for £25,000. It was a modest amount. It was a provision. It was there on a prudent basis, with a lot of work planning going in the background. It would have been very easy to have to have delivered that work simply by writing a much larger cheque. But with the work that the officer team have been putting in, and the political steer behind that, we've done that on a much more conservative basis. I'll use another example. We talked about it earlier. We talked about bus services, and we talked about the fantastic new contract awards, and the requirement for the council to put in £70,000 on an ongoing basis. The reason we were only talking about 70,000 on an ongoing basis, though, is, for example, at paragraph 3.8 of the report, where we'd been able to negotiate that government was putting in an extra 403,000. And it's only by having those sorts of conversations, which our officer team have been able to do, that we've been able to deliver that service for the extra £70,000 that we touched on. And so I would really highlight, we promised that we would have a strong grip on finance, and I would really put to the meeting that that's what this budget is showcasing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. And I think at that point we shall move to the vote. So, recommendation, have we read this out? 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4 in the report. Do I need to read this out? No? Okay, that's fine. So all those in favour, please show.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll move on to item 8, which is developing a resilient future for Torquay Pavilion. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman, and I'm delighted to propose the recommendation outlined on page 79 of the report. The Pavilion is a much-loved building that has been neglected over many, many years. We were elected in May, as I said in the first debate, on a promise to deliver, and we will deliver. Dave Thomas and I have made it a priority since the election to find a solution for the Pavilion and to deliver for the people of Torbay. We've had long discussions with MDL, and it was important to get the Pavilion back into council hands. And if this goes through tonight, it's next on the stage of getting that back, getting the Pavilion back for the people of Torbay. The part of the agreement is that we agree the heads of terms. They are outlined in part 2. Hopefully we won't need to go into part 2 as all group leaders and deputies have seen that report. The Pavilion is a Grade 2 listed building, as we all know, and it is loved by all, an iconic building on the seafront of Torquay, and one that needs to be saved for the future generations of Torbay. I would suggest, Mr. Chairman, that America has its Statue of Liberty, France the Eiffel Tower, and indeed London, Nelson's Column. This, the Pavilion, is Torbay's iconic building and must be returned to its former glory. We need to sign off on the heads of terms as soon as possible. We need to find an end user, and we will be going out for expressions of interest. And of course, we need to find the money to deliver, which I'm convinced we will find. I'm very happy to propose this recommendation as outlined in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I quite can match the little flourish there from my colleague, Councillor Lewis, so I won't attempt such oratory. But I do want to say thank you to him and to you and professional colleagues who've worked on this project. I think we would all simply like to see the Pavilion brought back into life and to fulfil its part as a part of the life of the town. I remember going to see theatre shows there in the 1970s, and my grandmother was there on the opening night and was taken to see or to listen to concerts of sacred music on a Sunday evening. And I think that didn't bring the crowds in then, and it probably wouldn't bring the crowds in now. But what this report does is open the way to a sort of pragmatic future. So we're going out to invite expressions of interest, and we're taking the Pavilion back from the current long leaseholder. They are making, in my view, a generous settlement that we can't refer to publicly. It's there in private, but they're making a generous settlement to the council, and there's money from the government. So it's everyone working together to get the Pavilion back into use, and I very much hope to be around to enjoy it when indeed it does come back into the use and is an important part of the life of the town once again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got hands raised outside, but just stay with the Cabinet just for a moment. Any comments, any debates within the Cabinet? In which case, quite happy to move to Councillor Darling.
Thank you. And I'd just like to add a little bit more to the theatre this evening, that Darling blood has been spilt at the Pavilion. So it's clearly a building very close to my heart. It was my brother learnt the hard way that when you fall over on an ice skating rink, that you should make sure you fall over with your fists closed rather than splayed. But much blood, sweat and tears were spent on driving this agenda forward by the previous administration, and I'm pleased that the new administration has been able to build on the way forward that we identified previously and had been able to work up in advance of the change of control, because I know whether it is the Pavilion or Old Way, these gems in Torbay's crown are very important, and we're keen to see them polished up and back in the crown again.
Thank you. Councillor Law.
Okay, I'm not sure. Can I sit? Do I stand? I'm not sure. Thank you. So I have to say, as you can imagine, I was so looking forward to this paperwork coming out. I've been excited since December about it. I think the last Conservative administration, failed to actually recognise the very special place, as Councillor Lewis has alluded to, that Torquay Pavilion has in the hearts, not just of locals, but our visitors alike. And I'm absolutely delighted that you eventually chose to carry on with the negotiations with MDL that the Lib Dem Indie Partnership began in 2021, I think it is, for the surrender of the Pavilion lease. So like about 8,000 plus followers of Save Torquay Pavilion, under a photo of yourselves with Kevin Foster, I was absolutely delighted to read in December in the literature put through all our doors that the Pavilion, and I'll quote from that literature, the Pavilion set sorry so is set to see major regeneration and repair work after a £10 million deal supported by £4 million of funding from the Conservative government was agreed. The article goes on to say that the deal is, and I quote again, now signed. So you can imagine how disappointed I was to read the paperwork before us today and to see that it isn't signed and there is no 10 million. So my questions really are, when will we get detail of this £10 million deal that, according to your own literature, has been signed? How many years extension will you agree on for the marina lease? What is the value of that extension? And I'm wondering if that is something that will then come back to full council. And finally, what's the actual timetable, as the paperwork that we've got here in our packs is at odds with the information contained in part 2. So although I've campaigned for 11 years for this outcome, and I'm absolutely delighted, don't get me wrong, and that you've continued the negotiations, I have to say for those reasons I am a bit disappointed with the information before us today. And just to build on actually quickly on what Councillor Bai said about the sacred music, the Pavilion was one of the first places that the BBC began to broadcast their orchestras on a Saturday. I think that was the late 30s, early 40s. We were actually leaders in the whole for those live broadcasts of bands that the BBC put out. So, yay, go Pavilion. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from outside of the Cabinet? In which case, I'll move to Councillor Billings before going back to Councillor Lewis to respond to the issues that have been raised.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's helpful just to take a further recap into some of the paperwork that we have before us, because I think it might explain the hard work that's recently been put in. So if we were to look at page 81 of the papers at paragraphs 1.2, and this really explains the difficulty that the Pavilion situation is presented. Paragraph 1.2 makes it really clear that, unfortunately, under a lease signed back in 1987, it wasn't clear whether it was the leaseor or the leasee who was responsible for the important upkeep of the Pavilion flowing from its inherent defects. And that's why the report that we have before us, which summarises the negotiations that have gone through, admittedly the figures aren't in there, but we've seen those privately. That's why we've got such a good outcome, because that lack of clarity in that 1987 lease provided an impasse which we've now been able to move forward. And that is a really, really good outcome, because that impasse had previously defeated all of the previous administrations that looked at this. And irrespective of the amount of work that they put in, they will not be able to move beyond that. And that's why I'm really, really pleased that we've got the outcome that we've got in this paper that moves the situation on. And I look forward to the really bright future that we all hope the Pavilion can have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you indeed. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Law, on a time scale, we hope to be able to, following tonight's meeting, sign the heads of terms within days or weeks. Very imminent to be able to do that. As far as the money is concerned, as you know, it's in the public domain that we're getting minimum of £2 million from government. The money which is outlined in part 2 from the MDL, then there is other money that we hope we'll be able to get and take it and get it across the line. If you want concrete answers to the questions that's in the heads of term, we'd have to go into part 2, I'm afraid. But I do assure you that as information becomes available, I will make sure that it goes to the leadership group and ward councillors and others as we make that arrangement. If that's acceptable to you, then we won't have to go into part 2. But we will, on the new way of working, keep it formed every stage. We don't want to make political gain out of this, or Old Way, or other sites in Torbay. We want it to be cross-party delivering for Torbay, and that's what we're committed to do. And I know that the opposition and other parties are also keen to do so. So I hope that helps. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. There is the exempt report that all members do have a copy of. If that's acceptable, we will move to the vote. Okay, so all those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Move on to item 9, which is the Leonard stocks acquisition. Councillor Lewis.
This is about the purchase of Leonard stocks. Probably not quite the same as the Pavilion in terms of iconic building, but there again, very important for what it actually does. Mr. Chairman, the Langley House Trust no longer wish to own the Leonard Stocks building. It's no longer part of their core business going forward, and have offered it to us for £1. We currently, since February, we took over the running of the centre in February of last year. Since then, the average stay at the centre has reduced from 506 days to 204 days, which is better for the clients and also better for Torbay Council. It is also, I think, vital going forward that we actually have control of the site and for the delivery to the clients of Leonard Stocks. And through housing benefits that we get from the clients of Leonard Stocks, we actually have a surplus over the running costs. So it's a win-win situation that we have the building back, but we also have a surplus that we can then put into other facilities at the centre. There is also, and I think this is vital and very important, there's a major concern that if we did not purchase Leonard Stocks, another authority could in fact buy it for £1, and then we would lose total control of Leonard Stocks. And then we may have residents who are not actually residents from Torbay, but residents from elsewhere in the country. And we can't afford to take that risk. So I'm happy to propose the recommendation as outlined in item 3 on page 89, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Tranter.
I just want to say that I agree with everything that Chris said. Since the services delivered in Leonard Stocks have gone in-house, everything's improved with moving people on quicker. And I think it's really important that we keep that service in-house and that we take ownership of the property, keep it in Torbay and belonging to Torbay.
Thank you very much. Any comments from around the Cabinet table? Thank you, Councillor Billings and then Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Lewis, you said it's not as iconic a building as the Pavilion. I would totally agree, but I would respectfully suggest that what we've got here is an even better deal. There aren't many times where a council gets an opportunity to buy a building for £1. Not one that has a commercial value that's clearly very, very much greater than that. Now, I appreciate, members, that there are social objectives that come from the purchase that go beyond the simple finances. And I appreciate there is a liability in terms of continuing to run the centre in its current form for a period. But ultimately, at the end of that period, and whilst we're running it, as you've said, there is a surplus that comes into the council, we will have bought a building for £1. And I would have suggested whichever side of the chamber someone would sit on, that ultimately is the substance behind what we've got here, and I would really endorse it. It's a very good, prudent decision. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Billings. Councillor Bye.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I was struck when reading the report and I think it's a very good report supporting this recommendation. I was struck this afternoon under the heading Strategic Need, and I don't think we should stray away too far from that, that the level of homelessness within Torbay is higher than the national average, and there can be up to 35 people identified as sleeping rough in a single night. And point 1.5, since the start of 2023, 7 individuals known to Torbay Council have died whilst rough sleeping. Those affected by homelessness are 10 times more likely to die prematurely than those of a similar age in the general population. The life expectancy of a homeless person is just 47 years. And suggesting in the report that the situation in Torbay is further nuanced, with an estimated 55% of street homeless adults having some form of substance misuse problem, and an additional number suffering from complex mental health issues. And then the Leonard Stocks Hostel is Torbay's only purpose-built short-term housing homeless hostel. So acquiring it for £1 seems to me absolutely the right thing to do if we are to meet the needs of this, the most vulnerable group of people. The building of the hostel, compared with what was there before, was something I was very proud of in my term of office as mayor. The architecture may not be as flamboyant as the Pavilion, but the need it meets is absolutely crucial, and how we look after the most vulnerable in the community is how we should be judged. So I hope that this will get full support.
Thank you. Anyone else from the Cabinet before I move outside of the Cabinet? Thank you. Councillor Long.
Thank you very much indeed. I was pleased to hear all the praise for the decision to bring the management back in-house, and all credit must go to the previous administration for doing that, so that's good. I just wanted to seek reassurance that the driving force behind buying the actual building is, as has been said, to improve the service there, and that it's not just a desire for economic regeneration around there and moving the building somewhere else. I just want to seek that assurance, because I have heard that whisper on the jungle drums. As part of the Adult Social Care and Health Overview Scrutiny visit, it was very clear that the work, excellent work that goes on inside the building, is very distinct from the antisocial behaviour that goes on outside. And I wouldn't want any decisions to move the building on that basis, because it does do excellent work and Leonard Stocks saves lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from outside of the Cabinet? Okay, in which case I'll come back with Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I can assure Councillor Long that the reason why we are buying Leonard Stocks is to provide a service. As Councillor Bye very clearly stated, there is a need. We recognise that need. We want to buy the service so that it is for the people of Torbay, the rough sleepers and others in Torbay who need that service. We have no plans to develop that building. I hope that puts your mind at rest. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. On to item 10, request for delegated authority to award a procured contract. In other words, the automatic number plate recognition system for Fleet Walk car park. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The matters that we're going to talk about are at their heart incredibly simple, and they're set out at page 104 and 105 of the agenda papers, and in particular we're going to very swiftly get to the recommendation at item 3.1. At the moment, Fleet Walk requires some car park barriers. The reason for that is because the ones that are already there have come to a period where the manufacturer no longer makes spare parts. And without those barriers being in place, we will not be in a position where we would be able to continue to charge for people using the car parking. And so if we were not to do anything at this stage, we would ultimately get to a position where the barriers would fail and we wouldn't be able to fix them. That would not be a tenable position that any landowner would want to find themselves in when they're operating a car park. And so what we have here is a request to provide the director applied in place with the authorisation to award the successful contract to facilitate the new automatic number plate recognition system within the procurement timetable. If we do not do this, ultimately there will come a time when the existing equipment will break and we will not be able to properly operate the site as a car park. And I'm sure that requires no further thinking because it has to be addressed, I would respectfully suggest. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis.
Mr. Chairman, very happy to second, and I think Councillor Billings has covered the points very clearly, distinctly, and I give him my full support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any comments from around the Cabinet table? Any comments from outside of the Cabinet table? In which case I'll move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. Move on to item 12, which is the draft community and corporate plan. Okay, so this one has been, we quite often talk about documents being living documents and not sat on the shelf. This one certainly is an absolute alive and kicking living document. I think in the introductory pages, I think it's got 6 or 7 different editions that it's had in its short life of 3 months, 4 months. That's because it's not yet been approved, and we have been working with everybody actually to try to get to a position where we can all agree. So the idea of this particular community and corporate plan is for it to be a 20-year document with a refresh date of 10 years. Sitting underneath it will be a host of council business plans, and of course it is envisaged that with each administration there will be a new set of business plans that sit underneath here, but that overarching community corporate plan, that position that we're trying to get to, will be a signed up, agreed position for the council to try and get there. We know that with our larger neighbours, we've seen examples in both Plymouth and Exeter of large schemes take a long time. They don't come forward within one administration. So delighted that, I was going to say this week, it was only as much as yesterday, we had a further roundtable discussion. And I think that, I won't count my chickens, but I think that hopefully we've got everybody in agreement on this particular plan. We will find out, of course, when it is represented to full council. So I probably won't say much about it at this particular point. And as I say, I think, as far as I'm aware, lots and lots of comments have been included in here from overview and scrutiny, from the individual groups' feedback, and hopefully we have support for this. Therefore, I'm happy to move it in its new amended version. Councillor Lewis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And I think it really is a very good plan. And I think what has made it an even better plan is the input that we've had from all councillors, all parties. And when it comes to full council, I really do hope that it has the full support of all councillors, because it gives a clear message then to the people of Torbay. One, that we're working together as a council, as members, and two, that we've got the best interests of Torbay going forward, and that they can look at us and say, this is a 20-year plan which improves the Torbay, not only for the residents, but for the visitors and for the businesses. And I think, I just hope that when it does come to full council, everyone will speak in favour and it will get everyone's support. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Comments from around the Cabinet table? Councillor Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to express my thanks and appreciation for all those who've been involved in this further refinement of the corporate and community plan. And it is particularly strong now, I think, with regard to children and young people. So there is a clear aspiration for Torbay to be recognised as a child-friendly place, and there's a clear aspiration to have outstanding services. There have been discussions where I've been on the receiving end. It's absolutely fair that I am, as lead member, on the receiving end of comment and criticism about where we are and where we might wish to be with regard to services for children and young people, and perhaps even some criticism. But a lot of what we want to see happen, and we all want to see happen, was within the community and corporate plan that was voted down. And it is here again, and even more strongly expressed in this latest refinement. So I very much hope we can all get behind this new plan and do our best for children and young people in the Bay. The previous plan, if you go back to 2019, in terms of children and young people, reflected where we were then, which sadly was judged as inadequate. So it was the sort of getting the basics right at that stage. If you read through what was written in 2019, it wasn't hugely stretching, because you had to do the simple basic things first, and all credit to those and the previous administration in getting us to good. But this now is much, much more ambitious for children and young people, and I very much hope it will gain everyone's support when it goes to full council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bye. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chairman. Similarly to Councillor Bye, really, I'd like to express my appreciation to all of those colleagues, officers and people who've helped contribute towards this document. Since we've last seen it, I'm aware that a huge amount of work has been put in, and I would really express my appreciation to members on all sides representing all political parties, and also those members that are independent as well, that have contributed in a collaborative way to get to the document we now have. But I equally, what I would really encourage going forwards, because I'm conscious that what we've got is a document that's ultimately written by a committee. And I spoke earlier, Chair, about the Brixham Peninsula Neighbourhood Plan when we were considering St Kilda's, and in that I was the Vice Chair, and we were reminded several times by one of our members that whenever you got a document that was a collaborative piece of work by lots of different people, it was always important never to throw out the good in pursuit of the perfect. And so, whilst I think what we've got is a great document, I'm conscious that there are maybe other members that may not think it's perfect. And that may be the case. But equally, what we've got is a very good document. And if we can all just agree it's good, maybe we could tweak it, improve it even more. But ultimately, one has to draw a line in the sand somewhere and say we now need to say enough tweaks, enough changes. We've got to move forward. And I really would say what I think we've got here is a very good document. And I would really endorse the fact that say thank you for those that have provided input on a cross-party basis towards it, and hope we can move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Timon.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to add that from the point of view of the housing portfolio that I have, that I think that the changes to elements of wording on housing, whilst minor, go quite a long way to strengthen and clarify our ambition in that area. I think thanks particularly to Councillor Cowell, who I think has pushed us in that direction. But I think it does give us now a stronger plan in that regard, a stronger ambition than was in the original proposal, or indeed in previous administrations' corporate plans. I think it's something here that actually, by having an input and then having another look at it from somebody else, adding to that input, has produced a better result than either party on their own would have produced. So I welcome having got to where we've got to, and I absolutely know that what I'm seeing in there on housing is reflected in other areas as well.
Thank you indeed. I move outside of the Cabinet. Any comments from councillors either in the room or in the virtual room? Okay, we will move back to myself. Thanks very much indeed for the comments. It's going to, hopefully, after we have approved it this evening, it'll go to council, and it would absolutely be marvellous to see unanimous support. As I say, I think really we have managed to. Everyone's had input, and nothing's been, ruled out that's been put in. So I think that's really positive. So all those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. My numbering was incorrect just a moment ago. I had declared that was item 12. That was indeed item 11, for those of you following closely. Thank you for the text. We are on to item 12 this time. Torbay Council Annual Pay Policy Statement and the Review of Pensions Discretions. Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I am happy to propose the annual pay policy. The Localism Act requires us to produce a pay policy statement for each financial year. This is a statutory requirement, and the pay policy statement must be approved by Council. The document draws together the Council's overreaching policies on pay and conditions and will be published on the Council's website. The employees' pensions discretions must be reviewed and approved by Council annually in line with the LGPS regulations. These were last approved in March 2022 and no changes have been made since then. I am happy to propose that the Council be recommended that 1. The Torbay Council Annual Pay Policy Statement 224 to 225, as set out in Appendix 1, to the submitted report, be approved for publication, and 2. The employer's pensions discretions set out in Appendix 2 to the submitted report and also be approved for publication. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I understand this is being seconded by Councillor Tranter.
Yes, nothing to add, just that I second it. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Move to the Cabinet members. Any comments, any debate, any questions? Move outside of the Cabinet. Any comments? Any comments online? Okay. In which case, we'll move straight to the vote then, please. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Move on to item 13, which is Budget Monitoring 23-24, April to December 23, the Revenue and Capital Outturn Forecast. Members, this report is for us to note. I want to acknowledge, however, that we are aware that the Overview and Scrutiny Board made the following recommendation. It is that the Cabinet be recommended to promote and encourage communities to apply for Community Lead... I thought that's land, isn't it? No, Community Lead Affordable Housing Loans. Oh, sorry, community-led. My apologies. That should be community-led. Community-led affordable housing loans. So the recommendation of the ONS board does not impinge upon the decision-making regarding the budget monitoring report. Therefore, the Cabinet will respond separately to that recommendation at its meeting in March. Okay? So just to understand that this basically makes the budget monitoring report one that we can continue with the recommendation for us to note and to for Council to ultimately note, and that recommendation from ONS, because it's not a financial implication, that can come forward as a separate item. Councillor Tyerman.
Thank you. I note that and suggest that we recommend that Council approves as written in items 2.3 and 2.3.1.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm happy to second that, and effectively what it is, we are noting the forecasted revenue outturn position and recommends that Council approves that it is noted and that the revised capital investment plan as detailed in Appendix 2 is also noted. So that's basically where we are. Any comments from within the Cabinet? Thank you. Anything from outside of the Cabinet, in the physical, in the virtual? No? In which case, move to the vote. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thanking you. Move on to item 14, which is the final item on this evening's agenda. This is a notice of motion that the Cabinet have received, and it is entitled Vision Rehabilitation Services. The promoter is Councillor Mandy Darling, and she joins us online. Good evening, Councillor. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for accepting this motion. Sight loss affects over 51,000 people across Devon, with obviously a proportion of that being in Torbay. It may be some people who may have had sudden sight loss through a stroke or an accident, or it may be somebody who's on the sight loss journey, and whatever reason for the sight loss, there is a time when there is going to be need for great support to help overcome challenges and to ensure independent living, and to ensure there is in the community, as I say, independent living and support for the person who is having the sight loss. We have in Torbay, I know, an excellent care provision, and we have a number of ROVs, which are rehabilitation officers for the visually impaired. But I am concerned that when people need the service that we provide, they're having to wait. And I have been in a new role since January, and in my new role I have come across people who have needed services quite quickly to support them, and have had a 3-month waiting list. So my motion is really to ask you to look at our service, ensure that we are providing the best service possible we can to a group of people that really need support at difficult times. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll move into the physical room. Councillor Long, I understand you are the supporter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and absolutely happy to second Councillor Mandy Darling. And you and I and Councillor Steve Darling were at I think, adult social care event with the Deaf Club, and I was speaking to a lady there who is volunteering, who is also involved in various voluntary blind groups as well, and she was saying how much they do and how much is put on some of our voluntary groups in the Bay, helping people to remain as independent as possible, and how much extra they were having to do to help statutory services, and how some of the voluntary services are struggling for volunteers, etc. And I'm aware of one vision rehabilitation service run by someone who's in the Barton with Watcombe ward, where they've had to reduce some of what they were doing through lack of volunteers. So I think this call for a review by Councillor Darling M is absolutely valid, and she has my absolute support in this. Thank you.
Thank you both councillors. Councillor Tranter will propose our recommendation, which we did publish earlier. I think it was yesterday, to be honest, or today. Thank you. Councillor Tranter.
Thank you. You'll notice from the reply that under the Care Act 2014 that we do have obligations to meet, and I know our director has spoken with the sensory team. They are very proud of the work that they do, and they are very happy for a review to take place. They welcome it. I think the sensory team in general the good work that they do is overlooked. The services that they provide are overlooked. So we really welcome a review. I just wanted to give you, actually we had some new figures released last week. They're released every 3 years. And we have 515 blind or severely sight impaired people in Torbay, and partially sighted or sight impaired 510, and those figures are increasing. So yeah, we absolutely agree. And I also want to commend the voluntary and community sector, because again they do so much work that goes unseen with supporting people with visual issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Oh, sorry, can I add something? That we are going to do a review, and the review will be completed by October 2024. Thank you.
Thank you indeed. Councillor Jackie Thomas.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I thank Councillors Darling and Long for their motion this evening. I confirm that as a local authority, we already have a legal obligation to help people in these circumstances that have been described to us. I believe the evidence-based review on social care rehabilitation with a focus on individuals suffering from sensory loss, particularly hearing and sight, will be a worthwhile piece of work. I am delighted that this will be completed by October this year, and I look forward to the report and hope it will provide the assurance councillors across the chamber seek. So I am happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments from around the Cabinet table? I'd probably just like to add, it was Adults Social Care Week last week, an opportunity for councillors to, I think we had over, certainly between 30 and 40 different events to drop into, and so I know I made the most of that and had a wonderful morning in Paignton with the sensory loss team. Very, very interesting. Spent 45 minutes trying to lip read, extremely difficult, but the tutor absolutely superb, and you know, it was really, really good. I'm delighted that the review is going to take place. I'd like to thank Councillor Darling, Councillor Long for bringing this forward. And as soon as that review is available, we will of course be sharing it with you directly and also here at the Cabinet. So thank you very much indeed. I just need to move to the vote to get that confirmed, and I will do that now. All those in favour, please indicate.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. That means at 7:19, the meeting is closed. Thank you. Have a pleasant evening.